Today is Wednesday, July 14th, and I'd like to take some time on my walk today to discuss a very practical topic that is likely of concern for parents of high school students, and that topic is how to prepare for and succeed on the SAT. Now, you might think, what in the world is someone like William Michael, who's always criticizing colleges and the K-12 system, what's he doing talking about the SAT test? Well, first of all, if you think that I criticize college attendance, you're wrong. I don't. All that I ever say about college attendance is that college attendance needs to be part of a business plan for a student's life, and that students shouldn't go to college just because others are going to college, and they also shouldn't go to crummy colleges. The point of going to college is to get a degree, and the degree, the primary purpose of the degree is to impress on a resume for the sake of pursuing jobs after college or pursuing graduate school or some professional school. So the whole nature of a college education is to obtain an impressive degree in one's field. To pretend that the quality of the degree doesn't matter is just nonsense. That's the whole point of going to college, is to obtain the highest quality degree possible. What I don't believe in is this silliness where kids get out of high school and they just decide they're going to college because they want to get out of the house or because their parents want them to get out of the house. And they go to some cheeseball state college and take out $25,000 in debt to live on campus and have absolutely no explanation for why they're doing that. That's what I criticize. I don't criticize college admission or college attendance. So the goal and my concern for students is gaining admission to quality universities, and more than that, quality programs in specific fields at different universities. One of the key factors in admission to selective colleges is the SAT test. And just for a little background, I was actually trained by the Princeton Review years ago and worked as an SAT prep teacher in very prestigious private schools. So a school like Charlotte Christian here in Charlotte, where parents are paying $18,000+ a year for a day school education, if your children would have gone to that school and you would have paid that tuition, when they got to their junior year in high school and it was time to start getting ready for the SAT, I would have been their teacher. And it was my job to prepare the students for the SAT test, and it was no surprise that the person that they looked to do the SAT prep was the classics teacher, who taught the reasoning class, the rhetoric class, the classical language classes, the history classes, and so on. So I have pretty good training. I learned a lot from Princeton Review, the training sessions that I had. I was also an SAT scorer for the SAT essay. So I have experience with the SAT test. I have experience with SAT prep classes. And as As an expert in the classical liberal arts, I know the subjects that the SAT is actually designed to test. Now, before we get any further into any details, let me just explain what the SAT actually is, because most parents and students don't understand what the SAT is. The SAT, originally, SAT, the letters SAT, stood for Scholastic Aptitude Test. Scholastic Aptitude Test. And that's important. Today, they don't really use those words. They just refer to SAT because they've trademarked SAT, and they just keep it at that for the sake of branding and advertisement and marketing and all this stuff. But originally, it was the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And that's significant. The test is intended for college juniors and seniors who are a year or 2 years away from beginning college studies. If you think about the name Scholastic Aptitude Test, what that tells us is that the SAT test is used not to measure achievement. It's not the HSAT, the high school achievement test. That's not what it is. There's no such thing as the HSAT, the high school achievement test. Yet that's what most parents and students and even teachers think that the SAT is, but it's not. It's not the high school achievement test, it's the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And I recommend you look up the word aptitude, because that's what this test is about. It's a test of a student's aptitude. And what aptitude means is ability. It's a predictor. The SAT is designed to predict a student's likelihood of success in challenging university studies. Let me say that again. The SAT is a test that's designed to predict a student's likelihood of success in challenging university studies. That's what the SAT is designed to do. It's not a test of what the child has done. It's a test of what the child has the potential to do. Again, it's not a test of what the child has done. It's a test of what the child has potential to do. And let me give you a good illustration from my own experience. Growing up, everyone knew that I had intellectual gifts. I was always at the top of my class, even as a little child. My kindergarten teacher used to let me read to the class during reading time because I could already read and I didn't need the reading lessons. I was always smart, always witty. And so I was in honors classes in middle school and into high school, but I was a clown. I had no sense of the culture of learning. I went to school to play sports and to fool around with my friends. When I wanted to or when I needed to, I could flip the switch and do well enough to not get in trouble with my coaches. So for example, The second marking period of senior English, I got an F in English. I needed to have a C average for baseball starting in the spring. So in the third marking period, I got an A. I could go from an F to an A if I wanted to, if I needed to, but I really had no idea what school was for. I was just a punk public school kid with intellectual gifts. When I finally finished high school, my grade point average in high school was 2.3. 2.3. That's terrible. But that was my graduating grade point average. Now, my teachers were always frustrated with me. Even my classmates used to joke around. One of my friends wrote in my yearbook, "The biggest waste of talent ever," where she signed my yearbook. And it was kind of a joke that I had all the potential, but I just didn't try in high school. My teachers were always frustrated with me. My high school Spanish teacher, even though I was in honors classes, refused to write a reference letter for me for college because she knew I was just a goofball. I had all the potential. I could sit in honors classes and just get by whenever I needed to, but I wasted my talent. I didn't put forth any effort in my studies. I had a 2.3 GPA, and I was voted class clown my senior year in high school. Now, that was all about high school achievement. My high school achievements were not impressive at all because I didn't care. I graduated high school and never read a book. I never read a book in my life when I was 18 years old. And yet I graduated and I was in honors classes, but I had a 2.3 GPA. But the SAT came along when it was time to sit and take the SAT, and my first score with no preparation was 1320 out of 1600. With no preparation, a CD student sitting for the SAT prep with no clue what was even going on, I scored a 1320 on the SAT, one of the higher scores in my entire grade. There were a couple kids ahead of me, but I was a national merit semifinalist by the time I finished high school. My final score ended up being in the 1400s. And so there were two stories about me as a student. There was my high school achievement, a 2.3 GPA, and then there was my SAT score, which started at 1320. The SAT score was a predictor of potential, was a predictor of college success. The GPA was a garbage high school statistic that meant nothing. The GPA talked about my past. The SAT talked about my future. Well, the GPA required me to start at a local state college in New Jersey. I went to college, got A's and B's my first year at this small college, and then I transferred into Rutgers University. And at Rutgers University, I graduated magna cum laude and was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, graduating near the top of my class. So which was more useful, the GPA or the SAT score? The SAT score effectively predicted my success in college. No, I was not successful in high school because high school is not real learning. But when I got to college and the challenge came to choose my own courses, choose studies that I wanted to study, that I was motivated to study, I was a straight A student. And the SAT recognized that. That's the purpose of the SAT. The SAT recognizes potential for college success. And it's important for parents and students to understand that. My wife, on the other hand, just for comparison, my wife was a teacher's pet in school. She was the good girl that did what the teacher said, followed the instructions, did all the homework. She got A's and B's in high school. But she didn't do well on the SAT. She was a great high school student. She had an average SAT score. My wife, on the grounds of her superior GPA, was admitted to Rutgers University, where I was denied when I was 18 years old. My wife was admitted, and she went on to be a B student at Rutgers University. She was an average college student. And once again, the SAT nailed it. That's what the SAT does. So there's something that the SAT is able to test. There's something that the SAT is able to figure out that the high school teachers and counselors can't figure out. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy teaching the SAT, is because it's, to me, very interesting, because I know that it works. But there's something that it tests that, like I said, the high school teachers can't figure out. They often get it backwards. The high school teachers' favorite students are often the kids like my wife who earn average scores on the SAT. The kids who get the high scores on the SAT are often the troublemakers. They're the clever students. They're the resourceful students. They're the students who can cheat and not get caught. So what is it about the SAT? How does it work? That's what I'd like to talk about, and then I'd like to talk about how students can prepare for the SAT, what their scores mean. What the SAT searches for is whether a student possesses the intellectual and personal skills that are necessary for success in college. Because college is very different than K-12 schooling. K-12 schooling is artificial, and as I always explain, fake school. It's not real learning. I just look at how parents contact me obsessed with record keeping, structure, order, schedules, and all of these crutches. The one thing that parents are terrified of is a wide open field where students have to actually make their own decisions, study on their own, and prove themselves strong intellectually. That's a parent's worst nightmare. What parents want is some kind of artificial system where if they just check the boxes, they get the diploma, they get the A on the report card, and so on. That's what parents want for the students. They're obsessed with organization and structure and lesson plans and all of these artificial school things that they can help their students get through successfully. Because in the modern school system, where there's all this artificial curriculum and records and report cards and all this stuff, other people can help a student succeed. Other people can make a student appear smart or successful in school. And parents like that. Parents are always concerned. You see the bumper stickers, proud parent of an honor roll student. That's what parents want. Parents want a bumper sticker. They want that. They want a high standardized test score on the 8th grade standardized tests, something that they can talk about with their friends. They want a good report card. They want an honor roll certificate. And all of this stuff is artificial junk. And the reason why it's junk is because parents can make their children honor roll students. The SAT locks parents out of the room and examines the student alone. And the reason why the SAT does that is because in college, the student has to study. Mommy and daddy aren't there. Mommy can't patch up all the mistakes. Mommy can't butter up the teachers. Mommy can't track the assignments and make sure her little angel gets everything done so that she can get on the honor roll. In college, all of these kids emerge from the appearances that their parents have created. And we learn who's who. We learn that that girl that looked so good and innocent is actually a dum-dum who has no idea how to study. We learn that that boy who had all those awards in high school has no self-control, and he's flunking out in his first year because he's never had to deal with the temptations that he faced on campus once mommy and daddy were separated. Now you can say, well, isn't it mommy and daddy's job to shelter a student from dangerous temptations? Absolutely. But if that child isn't growing with his own strength, it doesn't matter if he's on the honor roll. His mother and father better acknowledge that he's got problems, and they better deal with those problems and not think that these artificial school awards are going to lead him to real-world success. The SAT, for most kids, is the first time they're examined without the help of mommy and daddy. And that's why the scores are often surprising in both directions. Many students who look impressive in the artificial school system are found to be unable to do the kind of thinking that the SAT searches for. And many students who look to be bad students, I'll just say bad students, in high school are able to do the kind of thinking that the SAT looks for. And the SAT can spot the student who has potential for success in college and the faker who's being held up by mommy and daddy, by friends, by teachers. And the SAT begins to crack through this facade and reveal something deeper. So what is it that the SAT actually looks for? Well, let's talk about what the university is. The university has nothing to do with the K-12 school. The K-12 school is completely artificial, completely unnecessary, and yet almost everyone pretends it's some kind of unquestionable institution. But it's not. As I've explained in other videos, the K-12 curriculum and the K-12 school system is absolutely artificial, unnecessary, not even recommended by the most selective universities. It creates an appearance of achievement that doesn't address the complexity of true character development and learning. More important, it doesn't lead students to know how to learn. The teachers in high school are not like the teachers in college. The teachers in high school are not like the market. After college, the teachers in high school are like babysitters, and they do the work of a mommy with the children. They're not like college professors. If you don't show up to your college class, your professor doesn't care. He simply marks you absent and gets started with the lecture. You can miss every single class. He won't call your house. He won't come looking for you. He won't call mommy. He'll just mark you absent every day and give you the exam like everyone else, grade your assignments like everyone else, and you'll get the grade that you deserve at the end of the semester. That's not how high school works. And the SAT looks for the ability of a student to succeed in the university environment. The university environment is a diverse environment. And again, I don't believe that Catholic students need to be sent to Catholic colleges. And that's another topic which we can talk about. In fact, I think that these private Catholic colleges that claim to be Catholic liberal arts colleges are probably the worst investment parents and students can make. I know what will be said. It's a place for kids to make friends. That's what Elon Musk actually says is the only valuable thing about modern colleges, is you get to hang out with kids your age. But if that's why the parents are spending $30,000 a year, or the children are borrowing to pay that tuition, or all kinds of donations are required to cover the costs of these schools that offer this Catholic liberal arts education for tens of thousands of dollars, you have to ask the question, what is that degree even for? What does that degree signify? The point of a university is to prepare students for life in a diverse, democratic society. That's what America is. America is diverse in every way. It's diverse ethnically, in terms of nationalities. It's diverse culturally, in terms of lifestyles, social customs, manners, and so on. It's diverse religiously, in terms of systems of faith, beliefs, and religious practices. It's diverse socially and economically, in terms of resources and connections and opportunities. America is a diverse society. And everything that we do in American society has to be done in the context of that diversity. A good university introduces students to that diversity. That's one of the chief benefits of the university. Students gather with other students in dormitories, in classes, and those students have to sit with, talk with, work with, live with kids their age from all different backgrounds. When my wife and I lived at Rutgers University, we lived in an apartment for married couples, in an apartment complex for students, mostly graduate students. And every apartment in that complex represented a different part of the world. We had Muslim neighbors dressed in the full Muslim outfits. We had Korean neighbors, Chinese neighbors, Vietnamese neighbors. We had a neighbor from Iran. And we would take the kids to the playground. Jonathan was just a baby. He was maybe 3 or 4. We would take the kids to the playground, and the kids would play with kids from all over the world. And we would talk to families, to other couples, other students from all over the world. And that's the point of a university. That's why as a Catholic, I'm very comfortable dealing with people with other beliefs. And when I look at Catholics and all of the craziness, it's no surprise that when we find people who can't handle diversity, when we ask, where did you go to college? Well, here, I went to a Catholic private liberal arts college. Well, that explains it. You never learned how to deal with these kinds of issues and disagreements. You have like boogeyman imaginations about what people believe and how they live. You've never actually sat down in a class with them or lived next door to them in a dormitory. You talk about people with the ignorant kind of prejudice that gets criticized in the media because it's true. And you may think that your college environment is safe because you went to a college where everyone shares your beliefs and supports your way of life. But the minute that 4 years is over, that world comes to an end. It's one thing for children who are developing as minors It's one thing for them to attend a school that teaches them their parents' convictions and culture, because they're being trained. Those doctrines and beliefs and practices are being formed in them. But that's not what the university is for. The university is for the education of adults. If your K-12 education doesn't prepare your children to be able to live in a diverse environment, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you didn't give them a good education. If you have to build an artificial world around your children when they're 18 and 19 years old for them to continue to pretend that they're Catholics, your children are not well formed. If your children can't stand in the presence of people who don't share their beliefs and comfortably testify to their own beliefs, they're not well formed. By the time they're adults, if you've given them a proper education, they should be comfortable in their own skin. And that's the point of the university. The university is a diverse environment because the goal of the university is to prepare adults to participate in a diverse, modern, secular society. Now, this brings us back to the SAT. How is it possible for people to participate in a diverse adult society? I should add to that, a diverse adult, secular, democratic society. How is it possible for a college to prepare students for that? Well, students need to learn to be able to reason. Students need to be able to discuss a topic with people who share very different opinions and not try to force everyone to agree with them by mere emotions or by exaggerations or by false arguments or by pressure or by violence. Students have to learn that when the person next to you doesn't agree, you need to reason with that person. You need to be calm and relaxed. You need to listen to what they say. You need to understand their view and their explanation for their view. And if you disagree, you need to be able to calmly and respectfully articulate what you think is wrong about a proof that they've given or an example that they've given. And if that conversation doesn't lead to a resolution, you have to be content to leave that resolution for another discussion. In fact, that resolution may never come. And you have to be able to get back to work and move forward. You may need to learn how to compromise, to understand what you can compromise on and what you can't compromise on, and what happens when you get to a point where you cannot compromise. And often, the right answer, when you are the one in the group who cannot compromise, the right response for you is to withdraw. And so these skills of life in a diverse, secular, free market, democratic society are learned in the university through the diversity. That's why when you hear a university say, we practice affirmative action, and what that means is if we have two students applying for the university, one is an inner city black young man who has these scores and this academic record, and the other student is a middle upper class suburban white young man who has these academic records. And when we compare them, objectively speaking, the suburban wealthy white kid's records are better than the inner city black kid's records, but this white kid had many more opportunities than this black kid. And therefore, we're going to admit this black kid for a couple of reasons. One, he made better use of his opportunities. And two, he brings a unique perspective into the university community. And having him on campus, in the classroom, in the dormitory, is going to bring a different perspective and enrich the experience of the other students. Because that's what the university is for. In a modern, secular, democratic, free market society. And affirmative action will get criticized by the quote-unquote conservatives, but it's actually reasonable and meritocratic. The objective paper records of two students, when one student's records are on paper objectively better than another student's, when they're not compared relative to their opportunities, the resources that they had, if we consider just the objective scores, that's not meritocratic. Affirmative action makes perfect sense when you understand what the purpose of a university is, when you understand what America is. That's what the university is for. In order to be able to participate responsibly and productively in a diverse, challenging university environment where students are responsible for their own daily activities, their own schedule, their own personal habits, their own moral choices, etc., a very different set of skills is necessary than what's required to make the honor roll in the local high school. First of all, the students have to have a personal interest in their studies. Because as I said, no one's going to drag them to class or drop them off at school. The students have to get up in the morning, go to class, do their assigned work, study for their tests, participate in class activities, and so on. The motivation has to be in the student. And so when colleges look at high school students, they look for this personal motivation, intellectual curiosity, personal drive. That's one of the college success skills that are looked for. Second, to participate in this diverse society, students need to be reasonable. They cannot be emotional, selfish maniacs. They can't be the kind of people that punch someone when they don't win an argument, who take their ball and go home when they don't win the game, or who simply don't show up because they hear that other people are coming who don't agree with them. That kind of person is not going to do well in American society. In order to do well in a diverse society, a student is allowed to have his or her own beliefs. And no one will ever question that, contrary to what all of these phony cultural critics say, who themselves are so insecure and afraid of the world. If you believe in the resurrection, no one's going to lay a hand on you at the university if you say so. What they're going to judge you by is when you start explaining why you believe in the resurrection. Because if foolishness comes out of your mouth and you sound like a wacko, they're not going to hesitate to call you a wacko and give you an F for the essay that you wrote because it doesn't make any sense. That's not persecution. That's reality. If you're going to claim to believe something, you can't believe it because mommy told you to believe it. You can't claim to believe it because it got you pats on the head from grandma when you were at home. If you claim to believe something, you've got to give a defense for that belief. And if you can't explain why you claim to believe it, then you're going to be rightly mocked. And you're certainly not going to be allowed to force others to agree with you when you can't even explain your belief yourself. And this is the kind of thing that these fake school graduates are not prepared for. You may have a kid who says all the right things, but he only does so to make mommy happy. He only does so when he's rewarded with candies for saying the right answers. But when it's time to defend those answers, you may find that the little golden boy isn't so golden. And when he faces the pressure, not of persecution, not of temptation, but of simple interrogation, or discussion, or disputation, and he has a meltdown and crashes and burns, his cute little K-12 golden boy background is going to be exposed for what it actually is, a fraud. And you're going to find another kid who didn't say all the right things, didn't do all the right things, offended people now and then, was the bad kid in the homeschool crowd. But the things that he does believe, he himself truly believes. And he'll have no problem standing up in front of a group and explaining why he believes this and that. And he'll have no problem saying, as for that, I'm not so sure. His faith may be imperfect, but it's his faith. And those kids are better off when they're away from mommy and daddy and it's time to actually stand up and act with some conscience, with some conviction, with some guts. You can't fake it forever, especially when you're examined. that fake religion gets exposed very quickly. So the second major college success skill that colleges want to know about is the ability of a child to have an opinion and support it with reasons and with evidence, because it's his opinion. I'll often ask, or people will often argue with me about a religious topic, and for example, criticizing the Pope. And when I ask them, like, what proof do you have for your position? They'll send me a link to a Michael Voris video. No, that's not what I asked. I didn't ask to know what this other clown has to say. I asked you what your evidence was for what you claim to be your belief. You're claiming that this is your belief. Well, if it's your belief, then explain to me the process by which you came to this conviction, because you claim that it's your conviction. And if it's not your conviction, and you never actually came through some reasoning to this conviction, then why is it in your mouth? Step aside and let somebody talk who actually has some real conviction. That ability to say, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it, with honesty and humility. Not to claim to believe things that someone doesn't understand yet. There's no honesty in that. Or to simply admit, I'm a Roman Catholic, the Roman Catholic Church teaches this to be true, and I believe it because I believe in the Roman Catholic Church. That's perfectly respectable. Why don't you say so? And so the university does not persecute people for their beliefs. It persecutes people, or rather, it exposes people who claim to believe something that they don't, in fact, believe. That's who is in danger of the university discussions. And again, I'm talking at a competitive school where the students are sharp, not at some bottom-of-the-barrel community college, or even worse, some specific religious private college that doesn't even allow kids to really get into discussions. Because they're artificial even if they do. They're just pretending to represent different views. But they're not talking to people who actually hold those beliefs. And so the arguments are full of straw man, fake arguments that real proponents of those beliefs may not even hold. And this is done in the name of quote-unquote apologetics, which usually means we say what other people believe and then we pretend to defeat their arguments. So, personal interest, intellectual curiosity, self-motivation, and conviction with reasoning. These are the first two things that quality universities look for in prospective students. The third thing is what's called promise of success. Promise of success. St. Paul, in his epistle to the Romans, said, "Do not think more highly of yourself than you ought." There are many kids who can't figure out how to get a pair of shoes, but they talk about how they're going to go to medical school and become doctors, which is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and take 12 years of full-time studies. Their talk about their career plans are not responsible or realistic, not sustainable. And colleges want to know this. And so colleges will look for all kinds of different measures of these things. For example, who are the child's parents? What are their professional backgrounds? What kind of extracurricular activities does the student participate in? Because these may reveal some promise of success in a certain field. But there's another key characteristic that colleges can use to discern a student's promise of success, and that's resourcefulness. Resourcefulness. Every student who wants to apply to a selective university knows that the SAT stands in their path. The SAT is a test that is easy to master. It has specific objectives. It has specific methods. These objectives and methods can be studied. The producers of the SAT test publish test prep books with practice tests right in them. These books tell students what's going to be on the test. These books tell students what the answers are, and these test books show students real sample tests and give them the opportunity to prepare. A resourceful student will take advantage of that opportunity and will find a way to get the score he needs on that test to pursue his goals. And so the third skill that's measured by the SAT is resourcefulness, which is related to what I'm going to say as the fourth skill. Actually, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at those three skills, because I think that's sufficient. Self-motivation, reasonableness, and resourcefulness. I could even make 3 R's here. I could say responsibility, reasonableness, and resourcefulness. Let's do that. Let's say 3 R's. That'll make it easy to remember. Now, how does the SAT test these things? Well, first of all, the SAT, as I said, is not a high school achievement test. Because the high school achievement test would be owed to many people other than the student. The SAT tests the student in these 3 major areas. So let's start with the essay portion of the SAT. The student will be asked a question that's likely going to be a controversial, moral question. They're going to be given a little scenario, have a question proposed to them, and then they'll be asked for their answer. And this is a perfect example of a student having the opportunity to state what he believes and then provide the reasons behind that belief. And if a student can do that, he'll get a high score on the SAT essay, because that is the reasonableness that the university is looking for. I'm a Christian. I believe that this is wrong, and these are the 3 reasons why I believe this. This is not why my mommy believes this. I can't explain why my daddy believes this, but I can explain why I believe this. That's the purpose of the SAT essay, to see if a student, first of all, to see if a student is interested in important questions, or if he's just a dum-dum that's content to watch cartoons or play video games. What if he's asked an adult question? What if he's asked to talk about a mature subject? Does this kid have any intellectual curiosity or maturity? Or is he a baby? So he'll be asked a controversial moral question. He'll be given the opportunity to answer the question however he pleases, according to his own convictions and experience. And the student will be expected to state his own conviction, answering the question. That's what a thesis is. But then he's going to be tested for whether or not he can present credible reasons for his thesis or opinion. These essays allow us to see very clearly whether this kid is immature and has never even heard of this topic before, or if he's the kind of kid who is going to blabber about his opinions and have no interest in proving them. That's going to be very easy to discern from his SAT essay. And of course, the third skill is always measured, resourcefulness, because as I said, he has the opportunity to prepare for the SAT essay and figure out a way to overcome it. So these 3 R's will be tested by the SAT essay. The SAT essay is not testing whether he read the history lessons, not testing whether or not he learned the grammar. It's testing his maturity or responsibility. It's testing his reasonableness, and it's testing his resourcefulness. Let's go on and consider some of the other parts of the test. The language arts part of the test. One of the first things tested is a certain type of question called words in context. We might call this vocabulary, but that's really not what this is. A person who doesn't understand the SAT may think this is just a test of vocabulary, some kind of reward for the privileged children who grow up in a house where mom and dad are educated and have a good vocabulary. Kids can study all the big words and think that that's going to help them on the SAT, when that's not even true. And you'll hear that kind of ignorant nonsense all the time from people trying to sell fake classical education, telling parents that studying Latin and Greek helps on the SAT. That's false. That's unreasonable. And I can explain why, but that's for another talk. What the SAT actually tests is called words in context. Now, the reality of human language is that it doesn't matter what the dictionary says. When we have a certain word, it doesn't matter what the dictionary says or what your family means when it uses that word. What matters is when someone else uses that word, if we're able to understand the meaning by the context of what they say. And so the SAT tests a student's ability to recognize the meaning of a word based on its surrounding context. Now, the brilliant people who design the SAT know what the average dum-dum K-12 student is going to choose as the answer, what the little robot is going to choose. And they put trick answers into the SAT to catch that kid. When I studied with the Princeton Review, they had a name for that kid. His name was Joe Blah. Joe Blah was the average, non-thinking robot high school student who just says what he's supposed to say, repeats what he's heard, and the authors of the SAT put answer choices in that they know will be attractive to Joe Blah. They're traps. What the question asks is, what does this word mean in the reading above? And the student is required to read the passage, get a grasp of the context, and understand the meaning of that word in that context. Why? Because that's a necessary skill in a diverse society where people are discussing things from different backgrounds. Words may be used differently. And the way that you show your actual interest in the discussion is by paying attention not to your own thoughts, but to what the other person has to say, and whether you can understand the word the way he or she uses it. Now you may say, why do we need to learn that? That's stupid. This is just relativism. This is just modern blah, blah, blah. No, this is what Aristotle teaches in the very first chapter of his categories, in the beginning of the art of classical reasoning. This is reasoning. Being sure that we use words synonymously. Any reasonable person will be careful to first know what words mean and how they're being used. That's not some liberal idea. That's classical learning. That's why if you ever look at the laws of your state or of our country, you'll see that at the beginning of every section in law, there's lists of definitions where the lawmakers say, look, when we use the term murder, this is what it means. When we use the term manslaughter, this is what it means. When we use the term abuse, this is what it means. And the law only applies when that definition is true. That's not liberal whatever. That's called reasoning. Words in context tests a student's ability to pay attention to what someone else says and understand their words in context. Next, we have reading tests. If you look at the SAT, you'll remember probably the reading comprehension questions. Well, what's going on in these reading comprehension questions? Well, Tommy was raised in his nice little Christian family, and Tommy's family read the Bible all the time. And Tommy's family read C.S. Lewis books, and they read J.R. Tolkien books, and they read lots of Christian books. They're a good little Christian family. But Tommy's applying to the university. And in the university, Tommy's not going to be fed Bible stories and stories about the Hobbits or Lord of the Rings or the Hardy Boys. Tommy's going to face all kinds of ideas that he's never heard before. Tommy's going to have to read about topics that Tommy might not be interested in, because the world doesn't revolve around Tommy. And there are other things that Tommy is going to have to learn. He's going to have to learn to get outside of himself and realize that there are other people in the world besides him. And so the reading comprehension questions give Tommy something to read that they know Tommy has never read before. And you know what lazy, selfish Tommy's going to say? he's going to say, this is boring, or this doesn't make any sense, or I'm not interested in this. But if Tommy wants to go to the university, Tommy's going to have to learn to listen to what other people have to say, to read books that are above his quote-unquote age level. He's going to have to read books written by authors who think differently than he does, who know more than he does, who have more complex thoughts than he does. And he's going to have to be able to read what they write and understand it. And so the SAT is going to give Tommy something to read that they know he is not going to be comfortable with. And the question is, can Tommy make it? Can Tommy read and comprehend something that mommy didn't read to him when he was 6 years old? And so the comprehension readings are going to be obscure things that no high school student has ever read, because remember, this is not a high school achievement test. This is a scholastic aptitude test. We're going to see how Tommy's going to do when his history professor assigns him to read 50 pages in an ancient history textbook about topics that he's never even heard of before. We can find that out very easily by giving him 3 paragraphs to read from a scientific journal about some topic that he's never heard of before, and see what he does with it. If he can make sense of it, if he can make his way through it, if he can figure out what the author's saying, what the main idea of the passage is, and so on. And guess what? There will be trap answers for Joe Blah in those questions. And so Tommy's ability to participate in a discussion or read something from a source that's outside of his own personal, selfish world is tested in the reading comprehension questions. And that's how the language arts section works. Now let's talk mathematics. Tommy was a good math student. He got A's and B's in arithmetic and in his 10th grade geometry class and his algebra class. He did everything the teacher said. He paid attention and watched how the teacher showed him how to solve the problems, the 3 steps to take, and where to put this number and what to do here and how to do that. Tommy learned to do exactly what the teacher did on the board. And then when it was time for homework, Tommy went home and remembered what his teacher showed him, and he did exactly what his teacher showed him, and he got A's and B's in his math class. Well, that's all good. But it's university time now. It's time for adult life. It's time for real-world learning and occupations and problem solving. And guess what? In real life, the problems that need to be solved, you don't get a chance to watch someone else solve them first. You don't get awards for doing what the person did who solved the problem. The people who get rewarded in the real world are the people who solve the problems. And how are you going to do that if the only thing you've ever learned, the only thing you've ever done is copy the teacher when she showed you what to do? Well, that's not real learning, unfortunately. Your K-12 education got you a nice diploma, but it didn't prepare you for what actually goes on in adult life. So the SAT is going to come and catch you, because the SAT is not going to ask you to repeat your math facts. The SAT is not going to come and test whether or not you remember how to solve that problem from 9th grade algebra class. The SAT is not going to come and test you to find out if you did your geometry homework. The SAT is going to give you a problem that you've never seen before, and that problem is going to test 20 different concepts and skills. And it's going to see whether or not you can use what you should know if you're truly interested in mathematics to see if you can solve a problem you've never seen before with no mommy to help you, no teacher to show you what to do, just you. Your ability to reason, your resourcefulness, and whether or not you pursued more than just the minimum of what was required for your good grade in that math class. It's going to test your responsibility or personal interest in studies. It's going to test your reasonableness, whether or not you're able to apply what you know and reason to find solutions. And it's going to test your resourcefulness and whether or not you can figure out how to solve this new problem. And the teacher's pet and mommy's little baby is not going to know how to do that kind of work. And all of those A's and B's in high school math are not going to help Tommy when it's time to solve a new problem. The resourceful kid is going to figure out more of those problems and solutions than that honor roll kid. If that honor roll kid didn't take personal interest in those studies and seek them for the right reason. And the SAT is going to catch that faker and reward the true student who, when the teacher was going over the lesson, he was thinking of other ways to do it. Or when the teacher would show them how to do it on the board, he would use his own way, do the problem in his head and come up with the answer. And the teacher would mark him wrong because he didn't show his work. He didn't show that he did it the teacher's way. He got that question marked wrong in his high school math class, but the SAT doesn't care about that nonsense. The SAT wants to know, can you solve the problem? Yes or no? Choose the best answer. And guess what? Among those answer choices, there are going to be traps for Joe Blah. Because the SAT makers know how Joe Blah thinks, and they're going to catch him. And that's how the mathematics section works on the SAT. All of this fake education, all of this paperwork, all of these report cards, all of these certificates, honor roll papers, diplomas are meaningless when the SAT rolls around. All of those things can be obtained for a student by his mommy and daddy, by his friends, by teachers who help him. But the SAT is for the student himself, and there's no way to fake it. And again, that's what I love about the SAT. Now, we've talked about the nature of this test, and I think that that's pretty clear by now. Let's quickly talk about how to prepare for this test. And let me see how far along we are here. Yeah, we're pretty good, hour and 18 minutes. Let's talk quickly about preparation. First of all, the K-12 curriculum does not prepare students for the SAT. It doesn't. The K-12 program is exactly what the SAT is designed to catch. The SAT is designed to not let the fakers continue faking it into college. The SAT is testing personal responsibility for learning, reasonableness, the ability to have convictions and provide support for them, and resourcefulness, flexibility, creativity, the ability to think on one's feet under pressure. The time limits of the SAT are intentionally stressful. They're intended to ramp up the pressure and see what a student does when he's only got 15 minutes to answer 25 questions. That's intentional. And when Tommy starts pouting and throws his pencil down and complains there's not enough time, Tommy's making a statement about himself, not the SAT, because the test makers knew there wasn't enough time. And the question was, how would the students respond? So how do we prepare for this? Well, first of all, students need to get a real education. They need to study the classical liberal arts. They need to learn the actual art of language. They need to learn the art of reasoning. They need to learn the art of rhetoric. That's what these arts are for. This is real learning. This isn't the fake K-12, give me an honor roll certificate game that modern schools play. The classical liberal arts teach real learning for real life application and use. Classical mathematics, classical arithmetic, where one studies the real nature of number and learns to understand what number actually is. Who needs to know this stuff? Well, just wait till you get to the SAT. You'll see who needs to know this stuff. Classical geometry, where students are learned to reason. So if they say something, if they make some statement about a geometrical figure, they can prove it. That's reasonableness. That's a college success skill. That's learned in classical geometry. Plus, classical geometry, unlike a modern geometry class, teaches students the elements of geometry. It teaches them the definitions, the postulates, and the axioms. And with those postulates, axioms, and definitions, a student with reason can solve any geometrical problem. That's the whole point of the art of geometry. Music and astronomy, they may not be relevant for the SAT test, but the students who's intellectually curious will be eager to study them. And say that they most certainly do have a relation to the SAT. They mark the student who's not concerned about the minimum requirements, but is curious and wants to know, why do different sounds make a harmonious sound and two different sounds make an ugly and uncomfortable and unpleasant sound? Why is that? How does a horn work? How does the guitar work? Why do these strings make different noises? The intellectually curious student who wants to understand things will certainly be interested in classical music. Well, what about classical astronomy? We know now that the sun is the center of the... Oh, you know that? You know that? Would you like to provide us with the proof that led you to that conviction? Or are you just saying that? And are you going to try to pressure us by saying everyone believes it? Are you going to prove that classical astronomy is false? Or are you just going to try to bully people by saying nobody believes that anymore? Really? Nobody believes that? Are you going to prove that statement? Or do you just go around making assertions with no sense of responsibility to prove anything? There most certainly is value in the study of classical astronomy with regard to the SAT. Not directly, because the SAT, remember, is not the high school achievement test. It's the scholastic aptitude test. Then we get into philosophy. You don't think that the study of classical ethics is going to help the student write the SAT essay? You don't think that the study of natural philosophy is going to help the student with reading comprehension assignments, with essay question topics, and so on? And remember, the intellectually curious student is going to be interested in classical natural philosophy. He's not going to be content with the check boxes that tell him the minimum of what he needs to do for his science grade in 10th grade biology class. And then lastly, metaphysics. The study of immaterial truths of the universe? You don't think the university student should be interested in those questions and have those answers and have experience with those questions? And how about theology? A student's going to stand up in front of a university class and say he believes in this or that, and he's never read the scriptures? He doesn't even know what his own sacred writings say? Or what if he claims to believe something and another Christian stands up and refutes him from his own sacred writings? You think that's the mark of a successful university student? A reasonable, responsible student? Or is that the kind of arrogant bigot that simply tries to push his opinions on others when he can't even prove them himself? And St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica, is anyone going to say that that will not be a valuable contribution for a Catholic student to take with him to the university when he's planning to go and articulate his beliefs and defend them? The Summa Theologica is not considered important for that preparation? Or how about the Catechism of the Church? Is some kid going to stand up in front of a class and claim to be a Catholic and not even know what his own church teaches? Is that reasonable? Is that responsible? Or is that just superstition and ignorance? The accusations, the reason why I don't criticize the world when it attacks Christians is because many of the criticisms are true. And I agree. I agree with the criticisms. There are many people who try to force their opinions on other people, and they can't even provide evidence for what they claim to believe. And yet they're eager for others to submit to it, because they have some secular ambition. And they want people to get in line, not because they're actually persuaded by any truth, but because they simply want some benefit. And they want others to side with them and give them that benefit. That's what we see in these modern political controversies. There's no reason in most of this political action. There's no reason. It's just bullying, hoping to force people to one side so that they can receive some benefit from a vote. That's not reasonable. It's just bullying. So what we see is the university environment seeks to prepare young adults for a happy life in a diverse society, for an honest and sincere life as a member of an open, secular, free market, democratic society. That's what the university is for. Many religious parents, many religious schools don't want that society. They want to live in a society where no one is allowed to be present who doesn't share their beliefs, where everything doesn't go their way. And yet they want all those other people. They want the Muslims and the gays and the Protestants and the atheists. They want them all to pay taxes because they want all of the material benefits of the community. But when it's time to live as a member of that community, they want no obligations. They want no compromises. They want that money to be collected from all of the different groups in the society and deposited into the hands of their unique little isolated group, whatever that group may be. And that's unjust. One of the principles of the founding of the United States was no taxation without representation. And that representation is a right of all of the people that we ask to share with us in the payment of taxes. And because we're driving on roads we didn't pay for, making use of all kinds of resources that the Catholics didn't pay for, we have to share them with others. And that sharing is a part of what it means to live responsibly, reasonably, and resourcefully in a modern, secular, free market, democratic society. And believe it or not, the SAT does an excellent job in testing whether students are being prepared for life in that society. I hope that's a helpful overview of what the SAT is, what the SAT is for, how the SAT works, why the SAT is so effective, why so many people don't like the SAT, and how students who want to do well can prepare and succeed on the SAT. I hope that's helpful. God bless.